Okay, Chris, first off, thanks so much for taking the time to be here today. For anybody watching, my name is Seth Haynes. I run a website called The Musician's Guide to Hustling, where I help musicians get started freelancing. And so today we are doing an interview with Chris Coletti from the Canadian Brass. Chris, I'm sure many people know who Canadian Brass is and they might be familiar with you, but could you just give us a little bit of background about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, so I do play trumpet with Canadian Brass, and for the last 7 years, that's basically taken up most of my time. We tour the world, and if you know Canadian Brass, you know they've been around since 1970, so we're in our 46th year. I grew up listening to the group, so for me, it's an incredible honor to be part of it. And in my free time, I play with orchestras. I have a position in an orchestra in Huntsville, Alabama. It was my first job. It's a part-time group, and I feel emotionally connected to it, so I've held on to that. And I teach, and I blog, and I try to figure out the patterns that helped me get where I am today, and put them together and help other people try to achieve their goals.
Sure. So like, what are some of the patterns that you've kind of seen and understood as you've kind of gone through this in your own career?
That's like there's so many, but I think the most important thing is sort of breaking up. You're over there.
I can hear you. There's a little bit of like a clicking sound.
Okay, let me try to move this a little bit. I think the most important thing is the to really truly understand that. For example, my career is absolutely my dream career, if not more than what I dreamed of. Like it's beyond what I even imagined as a kid. And that didn't just happen because I got lucky, although luck, of course, is a part of it.
Sure.
But there's that never giving up for so long and being really nice to the people around you and making sure that your colleagues, not just your teachers, this is a really important part, but your colleagues respect you and look up to you as somebody that works hard and has really big dreams, so that when they want somebody to play something or want somebody to teach someone that they know, they think of you first. And if you pair that with an ability to sort of survey the land and see the opportunities that everyone misses, you realize that there's an infinite amount of chances out there. And most people always think that, oh, well, if I don't win, let's say, like in the music world, the big thing is like an orchestra job. They think like,
Right.
oh, well, it's so competitive, but if I work really hard, I'll win that job, as if that's the only opportunity to have a meaningful and life as a musician. And it's just not true at all. There's so many jobs. Similarly, musicians that have jobs, whether it's an orchestra job or a job like mine or like yours, we think like, oh, well, you're either a musician or you have a normal job, as if like a normal job is a real thing. There's really nothing. There's so many things out there, and the coolest jobs in the world aren't usually jobs. They're like a combination. It's a lifestyle, or it's a thing that you've probably never heard of, or it's a job that is a position that somebody made for themselves. You don't have to be a CEO
Yep.
or of a startup to have a cool non-job job.
Yep. Totally. So you said something really interesting that I'm always been really kind of so fascinated with the idea of like luck, because I think a lot of people perceive that, so somebody that plays in, let's say, the Canadian Brass, that you just got lucky and that's how that happened. And really, I kind of look at it, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, but I look at it from the perspective of that, like, luck isn't so much of being lucky, it's more of like consistently putting yourself in the position to get lucky. So for me, so people that follow my stuff and maybe know or they don't know, like I do a lot of like marketing consulting work, and I've been doing it for years. And I'm a really young guy, but I've been doing it for years now. And so like Chris and I were talking before, for those watching, that we were talking that I actually did some work for an Opening Day Entertainment Group, and he didn't even know I was doing it, which is the record label. Is that right? Record label for Canadian Brass.
Exactly.
And so I was like doing this work for this like amazing thing, and and someone was like, "Oh my God, you're so lucky." And really, it was like, well, yes, I am, and yes, you are, for doing stuff with the Canadian Brass.
Yeah.
But there's like I've been doing this and dogging it, like pounding the pavement for years, like, like you said, having good relationships with the people around me, being useful, just being somebody that's like valuable. And so, like, I think that's a really interesting thing you said about like luck, because it's like, yeah, there's luck involved, but it's also, the luckiest people have been working on being lucky for, forever.
That's so true. Well, I know a lot of the people watching right now are freelancers and they're trying to up their game. So, like, as a freelancer, one of the biggest things you can do to totally mess up your career and the relationships with the people that are ultimately going to be the ones hiring you is not to take a gig seriously. And it's really common when the gig is not a good gig, whether it pays poorly or if the players are, you feel like they're beneath you, or the music is bad, or the conductor's horrible. And these things are very common in the freelance world because ultimately it's just someone trying to put a project together. They may not be professionals or they may be new at it, but the worst thing you can do is be like, oh well, this stupid gig, and not make it the most important performance of your life, and just sound like you and really bring something to it. Like if you hire an orchestra of people, you're paying each person. Why would you want a string player to show up and hide? If that person's not adding to the sound, they're adding nothing. They shouldn't be there. They're just wasting money.
Yeah, absolutely.
And some of the best opportunities come from these bad gigs. For example, you might be playing in a really horrible gig, and maybe one of the string players, you might be a bassoonist, and one of the string players has a husband that plays in the Metropolitan Opera. And you might not think that somebody from the Metropolitan Opera has the time or willingness to come see this horrible concert, this horrible concert you're doing. But in reality, they're just coming to support someone that they love. And they either can say, wow, that second bassoon player was clearly a step above everyone else, and really took it seriously. And that could be a really easy way to stand out, as opposed to playing in a great gig where you might not get noticed as the second bassoon player. In contrast, you could come across as somebody that is obviously skilled and just not taking it seriously, which is a really bad thing.
There are plenty of those people. Plenty of those.
The most common way of believe it or not, so this is a really common thing, and it really messes you up. And another common thing that I see people mess up their careers all the time is complaining, because it's really easy to do. There's always something you can complain about. And they'll point out how, even if they're doing it in jokiness, a lot of times people feel like they're socially awkward, so they're trying to latch onto things to talk about.
Yeah.
Not that there's much to talk about when you're sitting in a rehearsal, but like they'll lean over, like, "Oh yeah, can you believe what's his name? This conductor is horrible." And I don't judge when people do that, but I feel bad because I know that ultimately some people might not be as forgiving of this negativity.
Totally.
And what you can do as a freelancer is you could be the positive light in that so-called horrible experience. Be the person that's positive. Be the one that's pointing out the fact that, yeah, everyone's saying this piece is horrible because it's a new composition. Well, you know what? You're going to use it as an opportunity to play the most awesome solo ever, or whatever. I think you guys get the point. But being the person that everyone's excited to have is the most important thing, because it's your peers, not your teachers, that are going to hire you. In school, a lot of people try to impress their teachers. They shun their friends. They never go out and hang out. They practice, and then they show off for their teachers. But the teachers aren't going to be able to help you out for most people,
Yeah, sure. And it's very situational for sure. But, I mean, I think to kind of just piggyback on what you were saying there, I mean, it's something that a lot of people don't give any credit to, if at all, is that I would venture to say, and you can agree or disagree, and I'm sure somebody's head's going to like when I say this, but like 80% of freelancing has nothing to do with performing.
Absolutely.
It's all about who is going to like show up on time, who's great to work with, and maybe once in a while somebody is cracking a joke about something funny, and if you can like just kind of blend into the scene and just have like some social awareness, exactly, that is going to take you so much further than being able to play the pictures at an exhibition excerpt like 1/100th of a time, like 1/100th of a fraction better than somebody else, which, because most gigs, it doesn't matter if you're the best player on. If you can just do a good job, then you can be a successful freelancer. Maybe you're not playing principal with, like, say, the Metropolitan Opera, for example, but there are hundreds and hundreds, and especially somewhere like you're in New York, right? Are you in Brooklyn, right? Yeah, I mean, there are thousands of opportunities going on any given like month in like it's like a busy month of the year, like April in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to be the most amazing person to play third trumpet on one of those gigs. But if you're somebody that people want to work with, you will absolutely get called.
Exactly.
I mean, sorry, go ahead.
So there's almost like a game being played around us all, and the ones that know how the game works, instead of complaining about how it works, are the ones that wind up winning at it. So that's one of the really key points. The other thing is and this is a more specific playing thing. A lot of people think that the better they are as a player, the more gigs they're going to get, and that's only true to a point. Like once you cross the line of being able to do it, like think about it. If you're going to have work done in your house, you need to have your house painted. You need to have the roof done. You're not looking to find the best roofer, the greatest painter in the world that you could hire, that money can buy. You're just looking for somebody that's going to do a decent job, that's not going to steal your stuff and beat up your kids. And you want somebody that's going to be responsible, like a normal person. They don't have to be the world's most cool person, really attractive. You just want them not to be total jerks, and they're going to be trustworthy and do a reasonable job. And the truth is with freelancing, you're basically, depending on the gig, of course, but you're basically showing up as a tradesperson. You need to be able to do the job and not get everybody upset. And as a musician, a lot of the times we focus on the extremities. Like imagine a big circle, and this is the extremities of what you're able to do. Like play higher, play louder, play faster, play the world's hardest concerto. And that has nothing to do with your freelancing career. The smaller inner circle, which is your fundamentals, your ability to just come in on a note that's really soft. You might have a soloist that's incredible at playing the Tchaikovsky violin concerto nearly perfectly in front of an orchestra, but when they're sitting in the orchestra and there's a soft entrance, they're always a little early. That person's not going to survive in the freelancing scene. It doesn't matter how good they are. And as a trumpet player, it's really easy to mess up yourself by working on all the hard stuff.
Right.
And then the conductor just wants a nice little bam. They just want a chord. They don't want to hear trumpet. They want to hear a chord. And then you're like, you can't do it because you're not practicing being a freelancer. You're practicing being a better musician. And you got to do both of those things. But you got to remember what the whole point of your job is.
Yeah, absolutely. So this kind of brings up an interesting kind of like segue into something that I would love to hear your thoughts on. And that's, we were talking about this idea of luck and kind of who it is that actually gets these gigs. So let's talk about some of these. So like you're in the Canadian brass, and for pretty much anybody that's like ever had a brass instrument in their hand has probably listened to at least one Canadian brass recording. I mean, like I would venture to say that like nobody doesn't know who the Canadian brass is in like the classical world. So that's like very much, like the kid practicing, it's, probably a mile away from me right now in Philadelphia, like listening to a recording, playing that trumpet. Like that's like the dream gig, right? Like that's like the thing that everybody's like, oh my God, like that's the most amazing thing. How could this happen to me? Like I'm so lucky. And yeah, you're super lucky. But so can you talk a little bit about how people actually get these kinds of gigs? So there are people. We were talking about this beforehand. I was recently doing some work with another like pretty big name group. They were doing a concert in Philly, and I was doing some PR work for it. And you talk to these people, and they're just normal people like anybody else. They're amazing musicians, but there's a difference between the people that are in these groups and the people that are just really talented trumpet players that can like play the snot out of excerpts in the practice room. But there's what's the missing thing there? And I would love to hear your thoughts on like the difference between somebody like yourself that plays in a very like famous renowned group and someone else that, hey, they might be a better trumpet player than you are. Who knows? But you're the one in the group. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, exactly. So we sort of touched on a lot of those things earlier when we're talking about like your peers and their opinions of you when they think of you without having to really try, whether you pop into their head. I mean, let's backtrack before either of us were either born. When Chuck and Gene started Canadian Brass, they could have found any trumpet players and horn players that they wanted, but who did they choose? They chose amazing players that they knew or they knew of, right? So being known by people that matter and having those people think highly of you is so important. Because I wouldn't have this job if it wasn't for Chuck and Gene starting Canadian Brass. and neither would any of the other people that were employed by this group. So in addition to this being a shout out and a thank you to them for doing that, it just goes to show you that when they were starting this group, that was an opportunity where people were probably like, oh no, well, I'm going to play in the Hamilton Philharmonic, a part-time orchestra that's stable, or keep my teaching job and not do a job like this. And then you become they wound up becoming rock stars,
Yeah.
So for me, I was a student at Juilliard, and a former trumpet player for Canadian Brass also happened to be a student at Juilliard. And I, of course, was super impressed that this guy was, first of all, able to be a student and be a full-time touring musician with a group of this stuff as such a young guy. And he and I were basically the same age. He was actually younger than I was. And it wasn't like I didn't do what some people do, which is kind of suck up to him or anything weird like that.
Yeah, you were a normal person.
Yeah, I was just treating him like a regular person, and he was a really cool guy. We're really good friends, and we're still really good friends, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one of the first things that we did together, he actually just showed up to my recital. I don't even think I knew him well enough at the time to personally invite him to my graduation recital, but I had posters all over the place, so people knew about it, and he just showed up. And he complimented me afterwards. I don't think it was a perfect performance, but
sure,
little things that it would have been really easy to not think of as opportunities that would ultimately lead to me being in Canadian Brass were super important to that. And the biggest of all was being the person that, I hope, and I'm not saying this because I think I'm an expert, but I'm saying this because I think when people would hire me, I would consciously make the atmosphere more positive. I would consciously try to play in a way that didn't make me look good, but made the whole group sound better.
Right.
A lot of players tend to play as loud as they can because they think they're being, they're showing off in a way that's going to impress people. But
right, which nobody cares.
It just if just the trombones are playing loud and they're blending as a section, that might be cool to trombone players. But if it's obliterating the orchestra, it makes the whole orchestra sound worse. So they might be high-fiving each other like they did a great job, and meanwhile everyone else is like, we got to get somebody else.
Yeah.
And it's you have to really think big and think big picture, and musically as well as just socially. So musically, you want to be thinking blending, for example. Listen to the last chair cello. Look at the conductor and interpret it in a way that's going to make everyone else know how to interpret it better, because some conductors are confusing. And be the guy that you don't have to be a social butterfly. People think of me as an outgoing guy. I feel like I'm really shy.
Sure. I'm the exact same way.
But yeah, you exactly. I didn't know that. I feel like you're a very outgoing guy. But if you know that what you're trying to do is trying to make the situation better, even if you're shy, you feel more comfortable making that move. If you're trying to come across as being cool and network yourself for you, then you're going to feel uncomfortable. So those uncomfortable feelings that people that are shy often have, I think, are good instincts, and you got to just remember why you're actually having them. It might be because you're trying to serve yourself. So if you're trying to add value to a situation, I think that's the most important thing a freelancer can do.
Yeah, you just said the bingo word in my head that made me jump for joy in my soul. That's so we were talking. So we've been kind of dancing around this idea of networking, and this is something that kind of makes I have actually a networking course that I kind of have on my blog that people sign up for. They take it, and I get these emails from people that take this course. And one of the most valuable things, and actually before I hop into this, because I want to listen to you more than myself, but I remember I met with Eric Reed, who was at the time playing in the Canadian Brass, and when I was doing a lesson with Eric, and he was like, "Oh, well, my buddy Chris just told me about this book that you should read, and it was called Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi. It's still sitting on my shelf over here. I pick it up all the time, and that was probably one of the most important books I ever read. At the time, I just totally needed it because it's everybody." Musicians tend to think about themselves a lot. We tend to think oh my God, I am so important. I'm the only person that can do this, play this well. And that's BS. It's not the reality at all. And it's so easy to get yourself in that mindset. But the idea of being valuable to other people more so than yourself, because the reality is they don't care about you. They care about a lot of people. And it's not this is not some taking shots at people thing, but people care about themselves. Everybody has their own priorities, their own set of values, and the people that are the best connected and just like have the best relationships totally get that. There's not this like they're very like selfless. They want to do things for other people. So can you talk a little bit about this idea of adding value to others? Because this is something that if anybody watching this or listening can really internalize this and start kind of developing it in their own life and in their own relationship and how they approach other people, you will instantly be on the road to being way more successful with anything you do. I don't care if you're a banker or a janitor or a French horn player, which is not far from being a janitor. But can you talk a little bit about this idea of like adding value and kind of what kind of some, and it would be really great to have some like kind of like concrete, like specific examples of ways that you've been able to do that, because I think a lot of the times, and I've gotten the impression that you're much savvier at this than a lot of people might be. So like adding value can be something that has nothing to do with music whatsoever. So can you talk a little bit about like some of these, like some specific examples and like how you've kind of seen that done well, and maybe it's you connecting with other people or people connecting with you?
You just underlined the most important thing, and you're right. I'm honored that you think I'm good at it, so thank you. But
yeah, I should thank you for recommending that book to Eric, who recommended it to me.
It is. I'll write out all the books we talk about, because I'm sure we'll bring up others, and so people could have it all once.
Yeah, I'd love to hear. We'd love to talk books, but let's hit this first for sure.
Yeah, so I think the one most important thing you can do, and it applies to everything, musically as well, actually, is to become a really good listener. So often, I mean, here's a situation that even non-musicians can imagine. Like you walk into any sort of social situation, maybe it's a meeting, maybe it's a house party, even a bar, maybe not a bar, a restaurant, anything like that. There's inevitably, most of the people there are there to have fun. Like you said, they're trying to make sure that they have fun.
Yep.
Everyone's idea of having fun might be a little bit different. Maybe somebody wants to blast the music and be dancing. Maybe somebody else wants to be sitting down and just sipping a glass of wine. I mean, there's all these different things. But we do have a lot of things that are in common, and that's that we all want somebody to understand where we're coming from. Like, our whole journey through life is ultimately just a really drawn-out process of trying to make sure that somebody understands where we're coming from. I mean, have you ever heard anybody not say that? Everybody, even if their life was picture perfect. It's like, no, but you don't understand. Like,
yeah.
So it's knowing that. And it's totally human. Again, it's not a bash on humans. We all have it.
Yeah, everybody does it. I do it. You do it. Everybody does it.
Knowing that, approach people as the person who might be able to actually help pull it out of them, right? Listen to what they have to say. For example, at a freelancing gig, what's really common is people click together. So the brass click together. They all go have a beer. The string players click together. They all go to a restaurant before the show. The conductor and the soloists, they all disappear and they do a fancier restaurant. It's like everyone just disappears. And what you could do, when you see that shy person sitting by themselves, strike up a conversation. Because you don't have to be, this is a really important part. A lot of times people get intimidated by making a move in a social situation, whether it's within a date or anything like that, because they sort of have this image in their mind of their ideal self, this like really cool, suave, extremely attractive, rippling abs, nice clothes, like this picture of themselves, and they're comparing in their minds, like what we do to ourselves. We picture this picture perfect person speaking to all these people that we want to introduce ourselves to, and we compare our actual selves or how we feel at that moment compared to that person. We're like, oh, man, I'm a total loser. I have no energy. I'm not interesting. Blah, blah, blah. Right. I'm not attractive. And when the reality is, you don't have to be this super suave person in any social situation. You just have to be like not horrible. Like,
right. If you just have like average social skills, you're already way above most musicians.
So I do a lot of backpacking. So like you'll run into people. And I remember my brother and I were talking because he's a salesman, so he works in sales. So this stuff is like life or death for him, just like it is for a freelancer. And we were walking by some people, and we struck up a conversation. We were just talking. We found out a little bit about them. They told us what they did for a living, and then we were like, that was it. We spoke for literally 3 minutes. And it was just like, man, that guy was so cool. But looking back, like, how cool could this guy be? We talked to him for 3 minutes. Was he really that cool? Like the coolest guy we ever met? He was probably saying that about us. No, he was just a totally normal person, and he was nice, and we were very nice to each other. And that's how easy it is to really stand out in these situations. Like when you go up to a gig, you just have to be like a pretty nice person. You don't even have to be over the top. Relatively nice, and you're going to stand out as being like, man, that guy is just so awesome. Like,
right.
I love having that guy. Like, so the most practical thing to do would be to listen. And the same thing with a musician. One of the most annoying things as a musician is to be playing, especially something difficult or a solo, and there's somebody else that is clearly not listening. And one of the easiest ways to know is that they're playing louder than you, or way or ahead of you. That's the word. You're playing trumpet, and you're trying to come in this scary entrance, and this guy, the second trumpet's like coming in early. It's like, you're like, oh yeah, what do you think? Is the intonation good? We're nailing it, right? Oh yeah, this sounds great. And I'm like, no, you're ruining it for me. Like, don't ask. If you have to talk about it, then it's really bad. Yeah, so the most important skill to develop as a human being, but especially as a freelancer and someone in sales, is listening skills.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and something else that's funny is that a lot of people think, I have this course, and one of the little like sections of it is just be valuable to other people, and really that just comes down to having just like a little bit of empathy, just understanding that like, oh, so like, let's say I sit down at a gig and the other person that's sitting there is like, I'm a 26-year-old dude that like I like live by myself in South Philly. It's me and my dog. I work from home. I hang out with my friends. We go to the bar. It's like my life is totally different than let's say I'm sitting next to someone. Let's say I'm sitting next to like a woman in her 50s who's been playing on the scene for years and years and years, a great horn player, whatever it is, and just having a little bit of empathy, like, okay, my situation is clearly different than this other person's. Like, how can I talk to them about something that's relevant and meaningful to them? And like, and they definitely know way more than I. So like, how can I like learn something from them? And like something as simple as just asking, like, if you had to give one piece of advice to somebody doing XYZ thing, what would it be? What was your experience like with this, that, and the other thing? They are going to be so happy to talk about it because people love to talk about themselves.
Yes.
I mean, I do. Everybody does. Everybody wants to talk about themselves. If you can just sit down and get the other person talking, that's something I remember. Actually, my former boss, who's an incredibly like talented people person, he can just like walk in anywhere and make anybody feel like $1 million. And he told me one day we were sitting at a bar and like after a performance, and it was just me and him, and somebody came over. He's kind of guy that knows everybody. And somebody walked up. We're sitting in a bar in Center City, Philadelphia, where there's thousands of people walking around. And this dude came up to him that knew him, and so Frank immediately, his name's Frank, and he asked him like one question, and the dude just went off for like 3 minutes, and then as soon as he was like, oh, I gotta get going, but hey, Bob or whatever, it was nice to meet you. And that guy walked away feeling like $1 million, and Frank never said anything to him.
Exactly.
And then it was just like, and it's like, wow. He's like, if you ever don't want to talk to somebody, or maybe you're not feeling like, super bubbly or social or whatever, like I'm a really introverted dude. Like it's not easy for someone like myself, or really a lot of musicians to like strike up conversation. But if you can just do something as simple as like get the other person engaged and have them talking to you, like let them go, they're gonna have the best conversation ever, and you might not even say anything. Like it can be something so simple. Like people think that adding like value to others, being useful to others, is always this super concrete thing. It's not. It could be as simple as saying like, "Hey man, I heard you asking about the Phillies score earlier. I looked it up and it's actually this."
Great example.
And it's like, okay, that has nothing to do with trumpet. It has nothing to do with social skills. It's more like, oh, I heard that guy ask a question, so I just look it up. Maybe I'm a fan too, whatever it is. Now we're talking on something that has nothing to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
And people might be listening to this thing. Oh, what does this have to do with music? And it's like, this has everything to do with like freelancing. Like this is how it works.
Exactly. That's great.
So one of the other things I wanted to kind of that I really admire about you is you said that you're a blogger whenever you in your introduction there, and so that's something that's like the kind of phrase that people toss around, and like a lot of people hearing oh, he's unemployed, like, oh, I'm a blogger, and as somebody that has a blog that actually uses it to like as a platform and like has a I don't have a huge following or anything, but I have people that follow it, and I do get client work through it because people find me, they read my stuff, whatever it is. So can you talk a little bit about kind of how you like the other things that you do that aren't specific to like physically you playing the trumpet and getting paid for? Because you definitely have a lot of things that you have your hands in, and something that I think a lot of people, I think they understand it like theoretically, but they don't really get it in terms of how to like do it, especially younger folks. Like they're so worried about like getting paid to like play their instrument that they don't think about like, oh, I have these other skills and things that go hand in hand with like playing my instrument that are going to be parts of my career. I mean, even people, and we were talking about this before we started recording, like people that play in like, again, we use this example of like the Metropolitan Opera. It's like the busiest orchestra in the country. Right. And even people that are playing in that, they do teaching, they do this other stuff. Maybe they like, a buddy of mine who I've interviewed on here, Rob Knopper. I mean, Rob runs his blog and he teaches people how to do auditions and but people do different things. I mean, I know people in the Philadelphia Orchestra that literally do like real estate consulting stuff. Like they just so happen to know a lot about real estate and they're interested in it.
Exactly.
I think it's real estate consulting. Whatever it is. It's something like that. It's other things. So can you talk a little bit about some of these other things that you are involved in and just kind of what that looks like? Because people look at you and they're like, oh my God, he's probably just rolling in it. He plays in the Canadian brass. Like, oh my God. And, it's like, well, maybe, but no musician is like doing that from one gig or whatever it is. So can you just kind of talk about a little bit of like the diversification of, you feel free to be as specific or non-specific as you want, but a little bit about like diversifying, what you do in your career.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point. So when I was younger, my image of what I thought of a musician was somebody that only played music, and that was like, to me, that I thought that would be something that made me happy. And I obviously, because I love to play music, but what I didn't realize is that as you get older, you love to do other things too. So I obviously playing the trumpet is my biggest source of of income, and the biggest amount of time I spend is doing that. I also, though, just because you asked, I do invest in real estate. I
how about that? I didn't even know that.
I do, yeah, and not because I think it's the only thing you should do with your money, but I have a lot of reasons that I do it. But mostly, in my mind, I don't know why, I grew up thinking like, when I grew up, I want to be successful, and in my mind, being successful meant you were doing that too. So like, I always wanted to do it. So I do that. I invest in I'm a private lender, so I invest in real estate notes and things like that, and then I do blog, and the blog is the one that I think is the thing that the listeners now is something that they should probably start doing now, whether it's blogging or not. It all comes down to these principles that we were just talking about, and it's adding value, right? So the most important thing when you're building up a network is making sure that that people that are working and doing what you want, A, know who you are, right? And B, think extremely highly of you. And these are things that you can completely control, because you could, like we said, play really well at a gig, be really friendly, right? Make sure that people like you, like being around you. And you don't have to be the social savvy person, like we said. You just have to be a decent person. So one of those things that takes it to the next level, that makes you really, so you can scale it so it could be a worldwide network, not just a couple of friends in the city you live, is having something on paper or online where you actually have a list of these contacts. So like you do, you have like an email list for your blog, and these are people that know who you are. So like, for example, I've been hired by people because I had a YouTube video up years ago, and they never met me, they never heard of me, they never heard of anything that I did, but because they saw my video, not even that it was the world's greatest trumpet video, but because they felt like they knew me. So what an email list is good at is making it so that you could stay in touch with a huge amount of people. I mean, there's email lists out there that have millions of people.
Oh, yeah. I know guys that have email lists of hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah, like Tim Ferriss, for example. If you don't listen to Tim Ferriss, you guys listening, you should.
Yeah, I'll link that in the post about that. I was literally listening to his podcast right before I was talking to you.
it's amazing. Like, I feel like Tim Ferriss and I are tight. Like, obviously, I never met the guy, but like, he tweeted me back once. It was like, oh my God, Tim Ferriss.
Chase Jarvis did the same to me recently, and I was just like, oh. Mark Cuban liked it. I think it was like an interview they did. I was just like, oh my God.
These are legends in the business world, right? So, I mean, it's amazing. Like, if you didn't have this online presence, and it doesn't have to be as big as yours or mine, if you just have something, people feel like they know you, and it's really easy. It's almost impossible for it not to be a global network, which is super, super valuable, especially if you're trying to be a freelancer or just a musician of any sort or entrepreneur of any sort. And to take it, the third step would be to actually create stuff that is valuable, other than just like most people have a blog or a Twitter account or whatever, and all they post is about themselves. Or a newsletter. That's the worst. Most musicians have newsletters, and all they write about is their concert.
Here's what I'm doing. It's like, I don't live in your city or care.
And I didn't sign up. It's just because we're friends. You just put me on your... You know what I mean? Like, I'm happy to support, and then it's uncomfortable. You don't want to unsubscribe to your friend's thing.
And then they shotgun the Facebook events out, like, oh.
And, like, they're trying to do the right thing because they know they have to get the word out. But the thing is you want to get the word out to the right people. And the reason email is so important is because once somebody's email address is on your network list, you could contact them for free. Advertisers pay millions of dollars a year to have an ad on the Super Bowl. That's more than millions. That's multiple, hundreds of millions.
Oh, yeah. A 45-second spot is, like, mind-blowingly expensive.
Exactly. Just to contact people, just to remind them that they might want to buy a beer, right? And it's so effective that spending hundreds of millions of dollars for a few minutes is worth it. But if they had those email addresses, they could send it to them for free, right? And it's different with beer. But so if you get to the point where you are putting out content on social media or a website that's not just me, like it's not just pictures of you on the beach. It's actually something that's helpful. You put out helpful stuff, right? And that's the whole point.
That's the goal.
That's the goal. Like, I'm trying to put out stuff on my blog that's people are going to read it and they're going to become a better player. They're going to get more opportunities. They're going to read a book they may not have read. And hopefully, because they feel like they trust me after I build rapport by offering free advice or anything like that, they sign up for my list where they're just going to get more of that. And then in the long term, if I do ever come out, let's say I don't have any plans to, but let's say I had a solo CD, or let's say Canadian Brass has a new CD, which we do, by the way.
Right.
I just email everybody, and it's not just like, bam, I have a new album, bam, I have a new concert, bam, I have this, and it's just obnoxious when people just delete. But like, oh, hey, that's the guy that like sent me a free ebook about how to not have performance anxiety.
Right.
It's a new album. It just develops rapport. So you could grow your network nowadays basically for free to an infinite size, and it takes the same amount of work as it does to go to a gig and a party and someone's house on a weekend and keep in touch with that small number of
people. So totally. And yeah, I mean, if I can, I mean, just because this is something that I like literally love this stuff. I mean, I spend so much time and energy and resources doing this stuff. Just something to piggyback on what he's saying here, what Chris is saying is that, when we talk about like being something useful, I mean, there's the tendency a lot of people have when they try to like market something is they immediately go in for like the ask. They immediately ask something else, and it's like, oh my God, I want to like, that's so terrible. There's like a quote by and it's like that's like their plan. Their plan's like, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna do that, blah blah blah, and it's gonna be amazingly successful. And usually people have no idea what they're talking about with that. I mean, I think it's Mike Tyson's like boxing coach, I can't remember his name, has a quote of like, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And but it's like that's like how marketing is. And so, but if somebody's reading that and like, well, why should I have a blog? It's not about that like you're going to like immediately generate like money from just like posting crap. But what it does is it gives you a platform and it gives you legitimacy as someone that knows what they're talking about a specific example. And it doesn't have to be like I talk about freelancing stuff. I mean, Chris talks about trumpet things and he talks about travel and all this other stuff. and teaching and like, pedagogical things. For me, like, I'm never going to write about that kind of stuff. I'm not a serious enough horn player where I could ever talk about that authoritatively. And if I ever do talk about that, somebody send me an email and tell me to shut up because I shouldn't be talking about it. Now, if it's marketing or like businessy stuff, like, I'm pretty hip to that kind of stuff. And so like, and I know that I can help other people with it. So whenever I write content, it's always meant to be like useful. And so it's not this like magical thing like, oh, I posted today and I made $100. Like, that's not how it goes at all. But whenever you're like if you're always being, like Chris said, if you're always being seen as someone that's like useful and has something to offer and value and putting value out in the world, like, you will get like thought of for things. I mean, that's how I came to work with opening day. Is that like Chuck was on this this interview for my website, and they happened to be in Philadelphia. You guys happened to be in Philadelphia like 2 weeks later, and he just sent me an email and was like, "Hey, if we can, like, you should come like sit in on a rehearsal." And that didn't pan out, but I happened to meet MB, who manages all the opening day stuff. I knew who she was because she sent me a Facebook message, and I just happened to see her in the lobby at the concert. So I just walked over and I said hello. And, within like a week, I was doing work for the organization, like helping out on the doing some website stuff, helping build out a few things, and just general kind of helping out with stuff. And like doing stuff for the Perfect Landing CD launch. I helped with some of that stuff. And that would have never happened if I hadn't just been like consistently putting out useful things and connecting with people and asking questions and finding people I wanted to learn from. And, I'm at the point now where I have a little bit of a platform, not much. I mean, I've got almost like 1,000 people that are on my list, which is not astronomical, but it's like, it blows on. It's like a really humbling thing to think about.
Yeah,
but
it's people that are, 1,000 people to, nobody would pay $100 million to put an ad to reach 1,000 people. Because it's random 1,000 people, but you have 1,000 people that like you and your stuff, and they're like waiting for you to give them stuff. So it's
they're musicians that want to hear about musician things.
Exactly, it's amazing, and not only to mention that this is really valuable for them, but also for you, but other people that might want to reach this exact group of demographic of people. They might contact you and be willing to give you money instead of the Super Bowl people, because they're the people that they're trying to reach.
Oh, right. A sheet music company would much rather like do something with like mine or yours or or the Canadian brass audience or whatever it is. And so
just an ad.
Yeah, totally. And so, but just to kind of like wrap that up on the blogging thing, at least of like, it's like, I think it's really important for people to like understand like the purpose. It's not meant to be like a direct form of income as much as it is building a platform for yourself where people can follow you. I mean, like Chris's stuff, the way like I've seen your stuff around for years, but the thing that really kind of like clicked in my mind is I saw your headphones video, like how to wrap your iPhone headphones, and I was like, oh my god, that's the most annoying thing in the world, especially when you're like stick them in your pocket and then you like a knot when you pull them out.
No, I hate that.
And I've never had that again after I watched your video, and I've been preaching the Chris Coletti gospel about headphone wrapping for like a year now. I'll share the video here if people that are curious. But yeah, so I mean, anyway, so you do a blog. So like, what are some of the other things that you do? Sorry, I got excited and we went off on a tangent there.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I'm always trying to keep my eye open for what is opportunities that will be interesting to me. And like I mentioned the real estate thing, which was interesting because I was interested in that just like I was mentioning as a kid, and I was watching I took seminars and stuff. By the way, I highly recommend anybody that's interested in improving anything. Like, we're trained to think like, oh, I want to get better at math. I'm going to go get a master's degree. It's like, whoa, like you don't have to go to school to learn stuff. I mean, there's like, you could learn from a coach, you could learn from a private teacher, you could learn take an online course. You don't have to like enroll and get college credits and all that, because honestly, none of that stuff really matters. I mean, Anyway, I signed up for a seminar for real estate, and I took a bunch of them, but one of them kept referring to a book that seemed really valuable. I was like, man, I got to get that book. So I looked up the book, and I found myself onto somebody else's blog who was
Right.
that wrote the book, and there was a pop-up. It's like, get my book for free. Just sign up here, and I signed up. Anyway, I'm reading the book, and my phone rings, and it's the author of the book. And I was like, at first it was almost creepy. I'm like, whoa, but it all made sense. Obviously, he had a whole marketing funnel set up.
Oh yeah, that's a complex system he has in place. But yeah.
Exactly. Well, the reason he knew my number, though, is because it was on my website. So, like, and he happened to be, and this is the kicker, he happened to be a trumpet player. So he was a full-time trumpet player, but he had like 99% of his income, with passive real estate income. So he had the free time to go on my trumpet blog.
That's super funny.
So it was crazy. So anyway, I became really good friends with this guy, and he has introduced me to a lot of these opportunities, and he taught me a lot of really important lessons. And that's part of the spiel is get a friend that's doing what you want. Like, get a coach, get a teacher, get whatever it is. It doesn't have to be college. And what this guy taught me is you want to, like, really write it down, a list of all your assets, like all the things that you have that could be working for you, right? And most of the time in investing, they talk about assets, you're thinking about your money. But really, as a musician or as anybody, your asset can be your money, but it could also be, if you don't have money, for example, it could be your network, your relationships. It could be your email list. It could be your ability as a player. It could be the things you own. Maybe you have a really valuable instrument that maybe you're not willing to sell it, but maybe you're willing to let someone use it, right? Or maybe
sure. It could be time. Like, if you're a student that doesn't have much work, whenever I got started, the one thing that I did was like, all right, I don't actually have that much going on, so I need to find something useful to do with my time. So I found people that were doing what I was interested in, and I just said, hey, can I just come observe, like, XYZ thing? And within, like, a year and a half, I was, like, a teaching artist for the Philadelphia Orchestra. I had, like, a teaching job somewhere else. I was doing all this freelance stuff, and years later, some of those people I've done client work for now, and I had nothing to offer but time. Where it's like, hey, I know that you're probably gonna have like a CD table. Like, you want me to man that for you at the gig? That's super useful to somebody.
Super useful, exactly. Or just being like, you're a fun person to talk to because you're a good listener and you have interesting things to say because you do stuff, right? So like, that's another asset. So like, sometimes some crazy person that you're trying to be around, maybe they're a famous musician, maybe they're an entrepreneur, maybe they're some big CEO. They might be surrounded by people that annoy them all the time, and you're like a breath of fresh air. But the point is he urged me to like really put all these things down on paper and figure out what you had to work with, and then like it was about investing with this in this case, but like invest your time in that. So that's sort of where I get my opportunities from. Blogging came from that. I found that I did have a lot of things that I wanted to help teach people with. I found there were a lot of common questions at master classes, so I figured instead of let this go to waste, and for example, email. I'm not talking about email marketing where you're having a list and you're emailing everybody, but emailing a response to one person is the biggest waste of time you could possibly spend, because you're taking knowledge that took years to build up. You're putting it into something that, whether they read it or not, will wind up in the garbage.
Right.
And it's not worth it. I mean, like, it's worth it if it's your friend. It's worth it if it's somebody you want to help. But when it really comes down to it, if you've got 100 people emailing you a week with similar questions, answering those emails individually is an absolute waste of time, even if you're supplying valuable information. So you should either get more people to help you out or figure out a way to automate it, or create what I did, is I created a blog that answered those questions.
Right.
Not in an obnoxious, like, don't ask me that, I got it on my blog, but ask me that. I want to know what you want to know, and if the answer is something that I can help, I'll be like, oh, here's the answer, and I'll type up a few sentences instead of 15 paragraphs.
Yeah, and you can read more about it here.
Here, and then they go to the website, and then they read that, and it's more thought out. It's not me in 3 a.m. writing an email that's going to have typo. It's a thought out blog that's been edited and tweaked. It's got photos. It's got videos. So, just examples. I mean, think about what you have to offer, and then figure out a way to offer it in a way that's scalable.
Right. So what would you say to somebody right now so let's say that, so to just give like a kind of hard example, we're kind of getting towards the end of our time here. So but I do want to kind of touch on this, because a lot of people say, well, I don't have anything to offer. What can I do for somebody? So like if somebody wanted to get in touch with like a like let's say there's like a coach that does work and you can't afford to hire the coach, like what would you recommend somebody do to try to get in the door with them? I definitely have like a million thoughts on this, but I would love to hear your perspective because I feel like you have some good experience with this.
That's a great one. So you mentioned one of the more obvious is like if you have time and your goal is to be around this person, then you should offer it, and you should offer it for free. You say, I want to learn what you're doing. I will
Absolutely.
whatever you want me to do, just do it for free. And you'll know from doing that whether it's worth continuing. You're not going to be bound to do it for free.
Yeah, wow, absolutely.
So and then maybe the less obvious though is but just as valuable is look back and think about the questions that your friends and close contacts, family, friends, students, if you teach, come to you asking. Because whatever it is that they're asking, it's obviously something that they think you're going to be able to help them out with. And a lot of the times, it might be something that you might not think much about. Maybe it's about cooking. Maybe it's about relationship advice. That doesn't mean you should start. If someone keeps asking you about, your best friend wants to know what they should do with their boyfriend,
right.
That doesn't mean you should start a relationship blog. But think creatively. Think outside the block. Maybe that means that you're the kind of person that people feel comfortable speaking to in general, and that should give you more confidence approaching a total stranger on a level that you're talking about. Or maybe that means that you should, whatever. That's basically what I would start with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, find the thing. Everybody has something of value they can offer someone else. It could be something as so stupidly simple as like, hey, I can scan all of your sheet music into PDFs and organize it for you.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
I have one of my teachers, like someone was doing that for her and she just gave them free lessons. Like she exchanged XYZ. She was like, hey, I'll give you like 4 lessons if you could take these books, scan them in, organize them like Google Drive so that I can I can use them on my iPad and not have to carry the books around.
Exactly.
Like that's a hugely helpful thing.
I mean, the easiest way to do it, and then it's a little bit less focused on yourself, is think about the person in question and think about the problem they're most likely to have.
Absolutely. Everybody has a problem.
Everyone has a problem. For example, this teacher might have the dream career, but they don't have time to do something like that. Honestly, I would love for somebody to do that for me. That'd be awesome.
All right, anybody listening,
But
if you want to get advice from Chris, there you go.
I do a lot of arranging, for example, and a lot of the times to get started, I just want the notes of the original piece, like in the computer. That's what takes forever. Like,
right. If somebody could play it out on the piano and transcribe it so you can just pull from there, it would save you hours.
Yeah, exactly. It'd save me hours, and I'd rather be doing something that's more valuable for me to give, which is maybe writing a blog post or practicing, whatever.
Right.
But find out what, and here's a really, really easy one. So a lot of the times we're thinking, oh, well, but this person, he's the CEO of Apple. How could Tim Cook?
They have more problems than we do.
He has more problems than you. And you know what the easiest way to do it? Ask them. Ask them what their problem is. There's a really incredible book. If anyone's interested in really getting into the, especially the marketing thing, it's called Product Launch Formula by this guy, Jeff Walker. And he talks about how to start a following, which for a musician, this following is often going to be people that either are going to be students of yours through a computer relationship of some sort, or people that might hire you as a freelancer. But for him, it was somebody that you'd be selling a product to. And he tells you how to start without a product and without any fan base. And it seems impossible, but all he does is he puts out on the internet, because everyone has some network, whether it's your Facebook page or something.
Yeah. Or the people you went to church with, whatever it is.
What's the biggest problem that you have right now? What's the biggest problem? They're going to write you back. And you know what they're telling you? They're basically telling you what they want to buy. Like if everyone writes back, man, I hate the way in my socks the heel is always up on my ankle. I hate that.
Right.
You have no
The seam
risk.
gets under my little toe. Oh, yeah.
You can create a product and spend as much as you want on it. And doing a little bit of simple math, you'll know that without any risk, you're going to be creating something that people just told you they want. And it's the same thing when you're looking for somebody that, as a coach, they're telling you what they want, and then you just come back and offer that.
Yeah.
My brother's saying that in sales, he'll often go into an office and just be asking questions like, well, how can we help you with this? What kind of things bother you about this part of the business? And after they basically say every single detail, he's like, well, let me tell you this. I'm going to help you out with this. And he basically just repeats what they said that they need help with.
Yeah. He uses their own words against them.
And what
That's
do they
like
say?
copywriting 101.
They're amazing. Like, You're the only guy that gets where I'm
Yeah.
coming from. You're the only one that knows what I need.
Yeah, you're the one that listened to me.
Yeah, they're the only. I mean, as opposed to someone that's coming in trying to sell them stuff without asking first.
Right.
And just because it's such an important analogy, it doesn't seem obnoxious as a musician to be like, hey, here's my concert, here's this and that, because it seems like, well, yeah, I'm a musician, that's my job. People need to know that it's happening, otherwise they won't know about it and they won't come. But it's the same thing as saying, if you want somebody to part with their money, you got to build a relationship first. You don't just walk up to a girl or guy and say, hey, I was looking at you and I'm ready.
Yeah, I saw you on Tinder. We both swiped. You ready to?
Let's just go to bed right now. Like, it's absolutely ludicrous. Nobody would say yes to that. Nobody that you'd actually want that would say yes to this. So don't go up to somebody and be like, hey, you want to buy my CD? Like, it's just as not, hey, you want to buy tickets to my concert?
Yeah, no.
Relationship. And it's the same thing whether it's a coach that you're hoping to become your mentor or somebody that you're hoping to become your customer.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we wrap up this, do you have any books? I mean, you've referenced several books here. Do you have any books that you think what you would recommend people read? I mean, we've talked about Never Eat Alone. You talked about the product launch book by, what was it? What's the product launch? What was it?
Product launch formula.
Formula.
Yeah.
We referenced Tim Ferriss, who has several awesome books.
All right, so here's one that I definitely recommend. 4-Hour Work Week. I bet you read it. But if not, if you guys are listening to this and you haven't read it, I mean, this is how important it was. I bookmarked everything, and I refer to it constantly. Actually, I have a whole pile of books here. Let's just do this. We'll have a list. You guys can check it out.
All right, yeah, I'll send you a note till we can get that, but for sure.
Get More Fans. Very important. It's very thick. It's like a textbook on modern marketing for a musician. Extremely important. It tells you how to build a network. Just general people skills and how to be the kind of person that people want to be around, which will lead to more opportunities. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Great book. I think what's one of the rules in that book is seek to understand before being understood, which is like the most profound advice for dealing with anything and anybody. That book is so good. You should definitely read it. Whoever's watching this, go read that book.
This is more of a musical thing, but anyone that's trying to learn anything new or just trying to get better at what they're already good at, The Art of Learning.
Yeah, Josh Waitzkin. Yeah.
Incredible book. I think that learning about real estate has been an incredibly valuable use of time just because it teaches you how to think like a business person. It happens to be one of the simpler businesses out there. It's a lot simpler than starting a company or even a blog that makes money because it's very simple business structure. And it's mind-blowing to me how this stuff works. And this is a book that's very famous, very short, and a fun read. Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Mm-hmm.
It'll get you thinking about what you currently have and how you can turn it into something valuable to others, which will ultimately get you more money.
If I recall correctly, one of the big things in that book is just understanding like how the choices you make act, like how they affect the larger picture of things. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's it's like the things that seem insignificant are just almost never as insignificant as you think they are.
I mean, it's similar to what Tim Ferriss says. He always says you want to test the what's the word he uses? But test assumptions.
Yeah, test your assumptions.
Test for assumptions. Like a lot of times, what Tim Ferriss does, which is really fun, is he'll find a world-class teacher, like the guy that taught Michael Jordan to be the greatest basketball player of his time. And he won't go to Jordan. He'll go to his teacher, and he'll find out what he has to say. And then he'll go to the best teacher of the other basketball players.
Right, the people that aren't famous because you can get to them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he'll find what the two things. One, the things that they teach in common that all the teachers say, and then the things that they have in common that they don't necessarily teach, but they all do. Like all trumpet players say, use more air, have good posture. All trumpet teachers, good or bad, are going to basically say that. But then there's something that all the greatest trumpet players do that they may not necessarily teach, but they all do it. That's what you want to know. Tim Ferriss and Rich Dad Poor Dad is really good at helping figure out that.
4-Hour Chef, the first section of that book, I don't know if you read it or not, is like the best explanation of learning out there. I'll link that as well. It's so good.
And basically, I don't know if you guys know Derek Sivers, but Derek Sivers, was a guy that played. He was a musician, and all he wanted to do was be a musician his whole life. And he had a really successful band. Just to give you perspective, those of you that have CDs, they were selling 1,000 CDs at a concert a night. I mean, like really a lot. And so he went to go sell these CDs wholesale to like Tower Records or something, and they refused to take them, even though they knew they were going to sell well, because he didn't have a distributor, and it frustrated him. So he created CD Baby, which he sold for $60 million. This guy's an accidental millionaire. He can't mess up. He's somebody you should definitely follow. He has a very short book called Anything You Want.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. He said...
I'll link to there's a great interview between him and Tim Ferriss, some like idea sex, if you will, here. That's awesome.
During that interview, he said something that changed the way I thought about everything. And he was saying that every book he read on psychology was worth it. And because of that, I'm going to recommend two. One of them is called Subliminal, and it's just an amazing manifesto on how our brains work. This another one is called Influence.
Yeah, that is a phenomenal book.
Phenomenal book, and actually in that same interview that you're talking about, that Tim Ferriss did there, so he talked about this book, Tricks of the Mind. It's by Darren Brown, the magician illusionist, and it is definitely mind bending. And two more, just because I can't help it.
I love it. I'm writing notes for myself.
Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath is these are guys like kind of like marketing gurus, because this book Made to Stick, it's really fun reading. It talks about how to create something, whether it's a story or whatever, that people remember. And he starts by opening a story about a person that woke up in the middle of the night in a bath of ice. They had stitches on their back, and it's like this crazy story about how